In this lecture, we will talk about another way that we can create objects that inherit from a prototype, and that's the object.create method. So we have seen the function constructor pattern to create objects from a blueprint in the last two lectures. But there are more ways to create objects and inheritance. So let's talk about the object.create method now. And let's first comment out this code here. Okay. So this is object.create. All right. So with the object.create method, things work a bit different. In this case, we first define an object that will act as the prototype and then create a new object based on that very prototype. So let's do that right now. And we're going to recreate the person example that we used for the function constructor lecture. So first we have to write the prototype as a simple object. And I'm going to call it person proto. So person proto, and now you see we no longer use the capital P in the beginning because it's not a function constructor. And what I want in the prototype, such as before, is the calculate age method. So we already know why and how inheritance work. Now we're just doing it in a different way. Instead of using function constructors, we will do it the object.create way. So it's simply a different way. Alright, so calculate age and function. And again, I'm going to console log it 2016 minus this dot year of birth. Now there is no year of birth here anywhere, but we're going to take care of that later. Okay. And now let's create John again. So we simply say object.create, and then we simply pass it the object that we defined to be the prototype object, which will be person proto. Okay, so let's see this in the console. Alright, and I'm not gonna console log this, so I will just do it the way we did before in the last lecture. So John, and here is the object. And now it's empty, there's nothing here, right? But we still have the prototype, and this already has our calculate age function. So this looks a little bit like before, doesn't it? Now we just have to fill this John object here with our data. So we can simply do it the old way, right? So John.name is John. John.year of birth is 1990. And John.job is teacher. And if I reload this now and say John, then here we have our object. And it looks a lot like it did before with the function constructor, right? So we have our data here, the job name and year, and then the prototype, which contains our calculate age function. However, it was not ideal the way that we had to fill this here, right? So the object that we created was empty, and then we had to fill it here with the data. So this time we're going to do it a different way because the object.create accepts a second parameter. So let's now do that for another person. So Jane, object.create, and of course the prototype is again person proto, but then we can pass a second argument, which is an object specifying the data that we want to have in the object. So name, and now we cannot simply put the name here, but we have to do it in this rather strange way like this. So we have to say value, and then we can say Jane. Okay. So this looks a bit strange, but it's actually how it works. So there's no way around doing it like this. So year of birth, and then again value, and 1969, and then the job. and once again value, and then designer. Okay, and let's now reload this. And John again, and Jane. So both share the same prototype, as you can see here, because both have the calculate age method, and then they have both their own type of data in there. Okay, so let's think about this again. The difference between object.create and the function constructor pattern is that the object.create builds an object that inherits directly from the one that we passed into the first argument. While on the other hand, the function constructor, the newly created object inherits from the constructor's prototype property. Right? So that's the big difference. And I hope this makes sense to you. Actually, one of the biggest benefits of object.create is that it allows us to implement a really complex inheritance structures in an easier way than function constructors, because it allows us to directly specify which object should be a prototype. Alright, so function constructors and object.create will be the most common ways of creating objects that you will find the most when you're looking for tutorials on the web. And that's why I showed you both in this course. But the most popular though is still the function constructor. And so that's the one that I'm going to use mostly in the rest of this course.